Hi everyone, Miss Debbie here with the conclusion of Aliens for Breakfast, chapters 5-8. I hope you enjoyed part 1. I love this story. I can't get enough of it. I just love it and I love reading it too. So, here goes. The mall was busy for Thursday afternoon. Richard wondered why. Then he saw that one of the stores was having a promotion. It was for a new men's perfume called Sweat. A big fat man dressed like a wrestler was giving out free samples. Ugh, why would anyone want to buy that stuff, said Richard. To attract the female of the species, of course, said Eric. Girls? I can see spending money to keep them away, said Richard. But I'd rather spend it on something cool like that. He pointed at a black satin baseball jacket in the window of a store. I don't have enough money, though. Mom says maybe she'll get it for my next birthday. Of course, I may never have a next birthday. Richard's hands and feet were really hurting now. After we have destroyed the drain, the brigade may find some extra money to buy you a gift, said Eric. You have earned something for all you have been through. Eric sounded so sure of destroying Dorf that Richard felt a little better. Gee, thanks, he started to say, but Eric interrupted him. Great Ganoob, cried the alien. What is that? They were next to Mutant Splendor, a store that sold sci-fi games, books, toys, masks, and comics. It was just about Richard's favorite place in the whole world. Today, the front of the store was taken up by a giant display of the Space Lords of Gygrax. The big plastic warriors had bright red wings, blue skin, and webbed feet. They were all snarling and holding laser swords as if they were about to attack. And here they looking. Look at Eric. Great Ganoob, what's that? The display had sound effects too, battle noises and strange space music. Richard's mouth dropped open. For a second, he forgot that his hands and feet hurt. This was awesome, 10 times better than the comic books. But Eric didn't think so. You call these Gygraxians? He snapped. They are a joke. You mean there really is a planet, Gygrax? Asked Richard. Of course, said Eric. But Gygraxians do not have wings. They have fins. Not only that, their skin is orange, not blue. And they never fight. They are the biggest cowards in the galaxy. This is an outrage. I want to speak to the manager. Eric started to hop out of Richard's pocket. Richard clamped a hand around him. How can you get so upset about a bunch of stupid toys? Time is running out. You have to remember what the secret weapon is. Was it Richard's imagination, or was he beginning to feel wobbly? Maybe he was dissolving faster. Eric, Richard went on, but then he froze. Dorf and Henry were walking down the mall. They were dressed in the same red t-shirts and ripped jeans. Dorf was talking and Henry was listening. He nodded his head at everything Dorf said. As Richard watched, they walked into Pizza World. Eric, gasped Richard. There they are, Dorf and Henry. Should we follow them or what? Follow, answered Eric. I've never trailed anybody before. What if they see us? Do not worry, said Eric. I will make us invisible. What? You can do that? How come you didn't do it before? It is very expensive, only for emergencies, said Eric. And it only lasts 10 minutes. Now let us go. He made a low humming sound that filled Richard's head for a moment. As he crossed over to Pizza World, Richard found himself humming too. He couldn't help himself. When he reached For the door of the pizza parlor, Richard's hand disappeared. He looked down at his feet. They weren't there either. He was invisible. Chapter 6. Being invisible was a little scary. Richard couldn't see or feel himself, so he couldn't tell where he began or ended. As he walked into Pizza World, he moved his arms and legs very slowly. He was hoping he wouldn't bump into anything, but even though he was really careful, he did. When he passed a table of 4 teenage girls, he knocked over all their empty soda cups. Ice cubes and paper cups went flying. The girls screamed. Richard froze. "Keep going," Eric's voice boomed inside Richard's head. "Have you never been invisible before?" "Are you kidding?" answered Richard. "I'm human. We can't do that." Eric gave a tiny snort. "Well then," he said, "just sit down quietly. Try not to move around a lot. At least no one knows that we are here. The drain is too busy with his food." Dorf and Henry were sitting at a table covered with pizza pies and soft drinks. Richard held his breath. Then he sat down quietly beside Henry. It looked to Richard as if the pizzas were the house special, death by pizza. They had peas, carrots, onions, cheese, and wheat germ on them. Death by pizzas were famous on the mall. No one had ever died from eating one, but people had come close. Just before drains divide, they build up their power by eating a lot, said Eric. Richard's heart sank. There were 7 pizzas on the table. "Hey, these look really good," Dorf licked his lips. "And isn't it great being here without that little nerd, Richard?" "Yeah, it's great, Dorf," said Henry in a spaced-out voice. Richard felt like giving Dorf an invisible punch. "Maybe Dorf will die from the pizza," he said to Eric. "No," said Eric. "The pizza will simply help him to divide faster." Dorf picked up a glass shaker of red-hot pepper flakes and poured it all on one of the pizzas. He breathed in clouds of red dust. A big smile broke out over his face. Then he reached over to an empty table and grabbed another glass shaker. He poured pepper flakes over a second pizza. Suddenly, Dorf sprang up. He went from table to table, picking up all the pepper shakers. When his arms were full, he came back and sat down. He lined all the shakers up in front of him. Henry looked puzzled. "What are you doing, Dorf?" he asked. "Eating." Dorf turned his widest smile on Henry. "I'm hungrier than I thought." One by one, he emptied all the shakers onto the pizzas. Henry gulped and turned green. "What is in the bottles?" Eric asked Richard. "Red-hot pepper flakes, the hottest stuff in the world. I can't believe he can eat all that and not explode." "That's it," shouted Eric. "Red pepper. I knew I would remember. That is the weapon." "Great." Richard watched Dorf closely. He could hardly wait to see what the pepper flakes would do, but nothing happened. Dorf wasn't dying. He wasn't even looking sick. He was enjoying himself. He devoured slice after slice of the pizza, eating faster and faster. Henry nibbled on the edge of a piece. Then he ran, gasping for water. Dorf paid no attention. He ate and ate. His fair skin turned pink. His blue eyes flashed purple. A terrible, greedy smile spread over his face, which was now covered with cheese and bits of carrot. "How come it's not working, Eric?" asked Richard. "I mean, if it's the weapon, shouldn't he be getting weak or something?" Then Richard had an awful thought. What if Eric was wrong? What if the pepper flakes didn't work against Dorf? "I am not wrong," snapped Eric. Too late, Richard remembered that Eric could hear his thoughts. "It is all coming back to me now. The weapon is pepper flakes. Drains cannot resist it. Once they start eating it, they cannot stop, and then they explode." And how come he's so happy? Asked Richard. If anything, Dork looked stronger now than before. If he were eating just pepper flakes, he would indeed die soon, said Eric. But he is eating pizza also, and that is giving him strength. What can we do? Asked Richard. We must feed him pepper flakes, and only pepper flakes, said Eric. Enough to destroy him, and we must work quickly. Okay, I'll give it to him, said Richard, tomorrow at school. Very good, said Eric. By the time Henry came back, Dorf was on his last pizza. His face was bright red. Henry was staring into his empty cup. He looked sick. I don't feel so good, he said. Have another slice, said Dorf. Could we go home now? I think I'd better lie down. I'm almost finished. I feel really great. There's nothing like a pizza to get your blood flowing, shouted Dorf. How about running around the mall a few times? Maybe later, mumbled Henry. Then he jumped up and ran off to the bathroom. We had better go, said Eric. We are going to become visible again in about a minute. Richard got up. Very carefully, he made his way around the chairs and tables. He opened the front door and slid out of Pizza World. Then he headed back to Mutant Splendor. No one would notice if a kid and a tiny alien materialized there. They'd think it was some new game or promotion or something. And that was exactly what happened. Chapter 7. The next morning, Richard was up early. Well, I guess today we saved the universe, he said nervously. Eric was curled up in an orange frisbee. He yawned and stretched. It is not the universe, just your little home planet, he answered. I resent that, said Richard. He pulled his socks on over his bandaged feet. If it's so small and unimportant, why are you here? Richard's head was pounding. Was that part of melting too? In any case, he was sick of Eric acting like such a know-it-all. All right, your planet is important. If the drains take over Earth, who knows what they will do next? But it is bad luck to brag and worse manners. Your mother should have taught you that. She tried, said Richard. He went into his closet and pulled out a 5-pound box of pepper flakes. He felt so weak that it was hard to lift the box. And he had spent $17.52 on it, his life's savings. There's Eric and the frisbee. I sure hope this works, he said. Do you think 5 pounds is enough? It better be. Dorf will divide in exactly 3 hours and 14 minutes. Then it is bye-bye biosphere. Richard shuddered. I guess we'd better hurry, he said. There's no place else to go if we mess up, is there? Negatory, my friend, said Eric. Richard, called Mrs. Bickerstaff, time to get up. Richard put Eric into his shirt pocket. He zipped the box of pepper flakes into his backpack. Then he walked into the kitchen. His mother, in her bathrobe, was opening and closing all the cabinets. Where did the tea bags go? She said. I could swear they were in here yesterday. Gee, Mom, I sure don't know, said Richard. He and Eric had cleaned up the kitchen the afternoon before in a big hurry. They probably should have been more careful. You're up early this morning, said his mother. How come? Something special going on at school? No, just felt like getting an early start, said Richard. Good for you. What would you like for breakfast? Some more of that nice new cereal? No, Richard croaked. He never wanted to see another box of Alien Crisp in his life. Richard's mother peered at him. Are you all right, honey? She asked. You look pale. For a second, Richard felt like a little kid again. He wished he could tell his mother everything. I'm fine, Mom, he said. He sat down at the table. Really? Well, at least have a good breakfast, said his mother. She smoothed back his hair. How about an egg? Sure, said Richard. To his mother's surprise, he ate everything on his plate. Then he kissed her on the cheek and left to wait for the school bus, right on time. Richard was glad Henry wasn't on the bus. If he saw Henry, he wasn't sure he could keep quiet about Dorf, and he knew that saying anything would ruin Eric's mission. Then again, it was pretty clear that Henry was under Dorf's control. He probably wouldn't believe me if I did tell him, thought Richard. He walked into school and stood near the boys' bathroom. A second later, Dorf and Henry came walking down the hall. They were both wearing red cowboy shirts and string ties. Dorf was talking and Henry was nodding at everything he said, as usual. Remember, do not look at Dorf's teeth when he smiles, said Eric, and step back after you give him the flakes. Drains can get violent before they explode. Richard got hot, then cold, and then slightly dizzy. Do not be afraid, said Eric. I'm not afraid, I'm terrified, said Richard. But even as he said it, he was stepping away from the wall. He stood in front of Dorf and Henry. Hi, you guys, he said. Hi, Richard, said Dorf. How are you doing? You don't look so good, buddy. Then he smiled one of his amazing smiles right at Richard. Just in time, Richard remembered to look away. Then he said, I was hoping I'd run into you before class, Dorf. I've got something I think you'd really like. Come on in here, I'll show it to you. He led them into the boys' bathroom, which was empty. Then he set his backpack down. It took all his strength to pull out the box of pepper flakes. Here, this is for you, Richard told Dorf. He opened the box. Want some? Dorf looked at the pepper flakes. Suddenly his face was wet with sweat. He smiled a hungry smile. His breath came fast and hard, and his eyes gleamed. His face turned bright pink. He grabbed the box away from Richard, and then he poured a heap of pepper flakes into his hand. He stuffed it into his mouth as if he were eating popcorn, only he didn't chew it. He simply swallowed it. Then he swallowed another handful and another. Sorry, I lost my place. Dorf, what are you doing? Cried Henry. Dorf ignored him. His eyes turned bright purple. More, he gasped. He poured pepper flakes down his throat. More! The snaps on his cowboy shirt popped open. His chest was bright red. It started to steam. Henry jumped away. So did Richard. Now Dorf's eyes were bulging. He finished off the box and his skin went from red to purple. Then his hair started burning. It smelled terrible. Yikes, said Richard. He grabbed Henry. They backed away toward the door. Dorf began bubbling and popping. His clothes fell to the floor in a smoking heap. He stopped looking like a boy and started to look like a blob of live, silly putty. Then he sprouted tentacles. There were dozens of them. They thrashed on the floor, making a loud hissing noise. Richard felt something on his neck. He jumped. It was only Eric. He had climbed on Richard's shoulder to watch. A horrible cry filled the bathroom. You got me, screamed Dorf. 2 more hours and I would have started dividing. My clones would have been all over your planet like ants on a candy bar. And then all you pathetic earthlings would have been our slaves. His tentacles flopped on the white floor. I hate to lose, Dorf wailed at Richard. I hope you flunk math and history. I hope you fail science and art and social studies and English and gym. and then he blew up. Chapter 8. It had been a great day. Dorf was gone, Earth was saved, Richard had stopped melting, and he and Henry were friends again. In fact, now that Dorf was gone, everyone in Richard's class seemed a little friendlier. Richard didn't know why. It sure wasn't because anyone knew he'd saved the world. The amazing thing was that no one even remembered Dorf anymore, except for Henry. He was coming over later to spend the night. Richard planned to tell him all about the drains then. The only bad thing about the day was that Eric was leaving. "Can't you stick around for a while and hang out at the mall?" asked Richard. School was over and he and Eric were back home. In a few minutes, the Interspace Brigade was going to beam Eric back to Ganoob. He was leaving from the same place where he had landed, the Bickerstaff kitchen table. "Sorry, the universe calls. Those drains never sleep," said Eric. "By the way, if you ever want to join the brigade, just let me know." "Would I get to fly around at light speed and blast monsters?" asked Richard. "Or wear a shiny red and blue uniform?" "Mostly you have to travel fourth class in things like cereal boxes, and they make you wear baggy overalls to blend in," sighed Eric. "Oh," said Richard. That sounded almost as bad as school. "The work is okay, though," added Eric. "Every now and then you run into a really brave freedom fighter, someone who risked his life to save the world. That is truly satisfying." It sounded like Eric was paying him a compliment, but Richard wasn't sure. "You mean me?" he asked. "Absolutely." "Wow, thanks," he blushed. Then he asked, "Will I ever see you again?" "Usually we do not go to a planet unless it is under attack," said Eric. "But sometimes we can work in a short stopover." "That would be great. We could go to Mutant Splendor and Pizza World, just like old times." "I would like that," said Eric. "And if you are ever near Ganoob, drop in. You would love Ingbar, even if she is a girl Ganoobian." Richard's heart sank. He knew he could never visit Ganoob. It was hard enough visiting his grandmother in California. But he managed to smile. "Sounds good. I'll try. Meanwhile, maybe you could send me a postcard sometime?" "Maybe. Or maybe I will send you something else." By now, Eric was standing on the salt shaker waiting for the Ganoobian transport team. Suddenly, he began to fade, like a TV picture in a thunderstorm. "Goodbye, Richard." "Thank you." He waved. "Bye, Eric. I'll miss you," said Richard. Then the alien was gone, and Richard started to cry. The next morning, Richard woke up suddenly. He sat up and rubbed his eyes. Henry opened his eyes at the same moment. He sat up too. "Wow, Richard," he said, "I just had the most amazing dream. I don't know if it was all that stuff you told me about Eric or what, but I dreamed I saw all these funny little pink creatures. They were bouncing up and down together in a circle." "Me too," said Richard. "I had the same dream. Did you see two of them sort of floating in the middle of the circle, looking really, really happy?" "Yeah, I wonder what was going on." Henry yawned and got out of bed. He started to get dressed just as Mrs. Bickerstaff knocked on the door. "Rise and shine, boys," she called. "Time to get up." "I bet I know," said Richard. "I think it was Eric's homecoming. And that was Ingbar with him in the circle." He smiled. They sure looked like they were having a great time. Richard opened his closet door. There on the floor was a brand new black satin baseball jacket. On its back, in big gold letters, were the words Interspace Brigade. Richard picked it up and put it on. It was really cool. There was a note in one of the pockets. "Thanks again," it said. "Wear this and have a pizza for me. See you." Eric. The end. Did you enjoy that or what? This story I have loved since the first day I read it, and I haven't gotten tired of it yet. So if you like this book, there's a sequel, Aliens for Lunch. I haven't read that one yet. And then Aliens for Dinner. And no one has written Aliens for Snacks, so maybe we can write that one together. Now, if you're fond of aliens, guess what book is in the library? This is called Where Are the Aliens? The Search for Life Beyond Earth. So we have a lot of fun books here in the library. Come and check us out. And thanks for listening. Bye for now.